have seen people with dementia do this so fluidly that you wouldn't even notice. I had a woman that I worked with all the time, and she recognized me. She'd always call me Cookie because she didn't know my name. I mean, you would never know that she had dementia if you didn't know her that well, because she was very good at keeping a conversation going, even though she didn't really know what was going on, or what we were really discussing. So there is some coverage there too, I think. So pay attention to the conversations you have with your loved ones. Maybe take some time and have a deeper conversation. They may struggle with vocabulary, having trouble naming familiar object, or use the wrong name. Like instead of watch, they say hand clock. They want the flour for the recipe, but they're calling it milk or something.
Welcome to Aging in Style, the podcast dedicated to celebrating aging and what it takes to do it well. I'm Lori Williams. I'm a certified senior advisor and senior housing expert. In each episode, you'll learn stories of older adults who are thriving in their 70s, 80s, 90s, and in some cases in their hundreds. Whether you're an older adult or the child of an older adult, this podcast is filled with insightful resources, organizations that are doing incredible work, and stories that will inspire you to volunteer, learn, and who knows, maybe even skydive in your golden years. Hi, welcome to today's episode of Aging in Style. We have Megan Rowe back with us, the Senior Program Manager with the Alzheimer's Association for Dallas and Northeast Texas chapter. And we are going to be talking about the holidays. And since we are, believe it or not, coming up on the holidays, we want to be aware of warning signs when you go home to visit mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, whoever it may be, the elderly loved ones in your life. There are going to be some warning signs that you need to be aware of and to look for, just to see if they are still safe living at home or if there may be some dementia. So that's what we're talking about today, 10 holiday warning signs to be aware of. So welcome, Megan.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Of course. I'm always happy to have you on here. You share such great information with everyone. So let's kind of dive into this.
Yeah, so this is a great topic to kind of dive into as we head into the holiday season. There are many families that are spread across the country. Lori, I don't know if you can personally relate to that, but I can. I have family all over, and sometimes you don't recognize changes when you haven't seen them in a while. So we're going to be sharing a little bit about some things to look out for. You know, it's very common for people to think that dementia and Alzheimer's disease only affects memory, but it does affect quite a few more things than that. And, you know, when we talk about memory, we're talking about memory that disrupts daily life. So have you ever lost your keys or couldn't figure out where your car was in the parking lot?
You know, that happens to me quite frequently. Actually, I can't find my car just because I'm not paying attention. Yeah.
That's a normal thing that happens to all of us. We get busy, we get sidetracked on what we're going to the store for or whatever it is. And the trick to that, though, is that we can retrace our steps or figure it out at some point. Someone with dementia or memory loss that's affected because of dementia is not going to be able to retrace those steps. So don't be too alarmed if you are losing things, your keys, or can't find something. So memory loss is one of the most common signs, of course, especially in the early stage. Forgetting recently learned information is the key here. So that short-term memory is really affected. So Laura, if you tell me you have a doctor's appointment and you're going to head out and I can't remember, you know, where you're headed to the same day you told me the information, that could be a warning sign. Mm-hmm. So forgetting recently learned information. Also forgetting important dates or events. So like maybe your anniversary, birthdays, asking the same questions over and over again. I experienced this personally with one of my great aunts when I was in my probably early 20s. She would visit and it'd been a long time since I'd seen her. And she would ask me, are you in college now? And, you know, all these different things. And I would share with her all about that. And then 5 minutes later, she'd ask me the same question. And at the time, I didn't know that that was a sign of dementia, but she definitely progressed into having a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease.
And I think sometimes, you know, things like that, and especially, you know, 10, 15 years ago, people might have just attributed it to, oh, you're getting older. But as we've learned and listening to, you know, having you on the podcast, that dementia, it doesn't equate to old age. It's not just, you're not going to get dementia just because you're getting older.
Right. The risk for developing dementia, the greatest risk factor is age, but dementia is not a normal part of aging. So that's a good point. So someone with memory loss that it really impacts their daily routines, you're going to see that they rely a lot on memory aids like Post-it notes or some kind of device to track, what things are going on, alarms, or if they have a spouse or someone that they live with, that person can very much cover for maybe some of the things that are happening for the person with suspected dementia.
So that's something so common, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, we hear that all the time, especially with people who their family lives across the country and they haven't seen them and they have no idea until they go to visit. And dad was covering the whole time for mom and had no idea how far she had progressed with dementia. So that's pretty common, I think, right?
Yeah, and if they're no longer doing the things that they spent years doing, like maybe they were the primary cook in the house and now all of a sudden dad is cooking all the meals, or if they handled the finances and now all of a sudden someone else is handling the finances, those might be some warnings for you all to keep an eye on. It's not to say that a spouse or someone couldn't take care of their loved one, but it's a very difficult disease to handle on your own. And, loved ones want to be there and want to take care of their spouse or loved one, but they are going to need help, especially as disease progresses. So being on top of this information is really helpful.
Yeah. And I think the problem with spouses sometimes is like they want to keep it a secret. They don't want to share it with people because they don't want to worry the kids, or they don't want to, we don't want you to put us in the home, which it's not a home, but we get that a lot. And it's just a lot of fear-based reasons why they don't say anything. The other thing I was going to mention, we get this a lot, is that they used to go to church, or they were very involved in church, and now they've stopped going because they know they don't want to be asked a question, and people that they know see that they can't remember, that they are having some issues.
Yeah. So one of the warning signs, and I'm just going to skip right to it, is withdrawal from work or social activities. So you're so right. A person with Alzheimer's disease or dementia, especially in the earlier stages, may recognize their own change in abilities and skills and have a fear of people finding out. And a lot of times people will withdraw from those social activities for fear of judgment or how that's, people are going to take that. Or they might just not be able to keep up with the activity. And, there's the stigma so much with dementia, but there's ways to live well with dementia. And so I appreciate always having the opportunity to be on your podcast, because the more we talk about this, the more people will understand it. So including someone with dementia or someone that's progressing with dementia into social activities is really important for well-being. So the more you work as a family and friends and a community to support a person with dementia, the better quality of life they're going to have. So recognizing these things as family members is really important. Ask what your loved ones are up to. What's their routine like? Are they going out? Are they getting fresh air? Are they going to the clubs they used to? So another warning sign to look out for is challenges in planning or solving problems. That can be affected by cognitive decline. Now, it's important to recognize that although I'm going to provide you 10 warning signs, not everyone experiences all 10. So if this doesn't sound familiar, it's okay, because there might be other things that, you kind of start to look for little red flags that you might need to inquire with a doctor or the family about. The challenges in planning or solving problems, this might be something like having difficulty following a plan or working with numbers. Someone that could, balance a checkbook, maybe can't do that as well anymore. Or someone who, say, made some kind of food from scratch their whole life, and now they're trying to follow a recipe that they're struggling following the recipe when they never used it before. Mm-hmm. Keeping track of monthly bills can be very scary for, your loved ones. You want to make sure that everything's taken care of and that there's no sitting bills, or they're paying for things that maybe you don't really know what they're paying for. And this is where financial fraud and exploitation can really take a hold of seniors, especially ones that are impacted by dementia.
Mm-hmm.
So
A lot
unfortunately,
of times, yeah, I was just going to say, a lot of times families will reach out to us, and that is one of the first things they notice, that, maybe dad was always, perfect with paying his bills, and now he's either double and triple paying in a month, or he's not paying at all. So that is one of the first signs we hear a lot from people when they contact us.
Yeah. So one thing that, you can see how if someone's overpaying or underpaying their bills or being taken advantage of by someone selling something or saying they're selling something, you can also probably understand why it would be difficult to manage your own medication. So if you have loved ones that are, experiencing signs and symptoms, but also have diabetes or heart, they take blood pressure medication or stuff that really needs to be handled very accurately daily, that can be a little challenging because someone may not remember if they took their medicine, or they might take too many because they forgot they already took it this morning. So these are kinds of some things that there's some safety things that you can put in place to help with the finances, to help with the medication management. If this is something you're noticing with problem solving or just the challenges with even planning, making plans. Difficulty completing familiar tasks is another sign. So driving to a familiar location, going to a grocery store, but creating a grocery list and then going to a grocery store and trying to figure out how to get all the items on the list, or remembering rules of a favorite game. I used to work with someone who played bridge religiously. Well, bridge is not the most simple game.
No, it's not.
And unfortunately, over time, that love for that game, had to be adapted into other games because of just how complicated it was. So a typical age-related change would be, needing help to use a new remote or a phone, or, how do I work this microwave that has 30 buttons on it? I'm finding myself not knowing how to use certain apps that I'm having to ask younger folks for help with. So that's kind of my age-related
that's kind of the nice thing about having teenagers in the house or young adults, because half the time I can't remember how to switch the remote to get it on Netflix, or, I don't know. It's complicated to me.
Right. So there's things like that where I feel like technology sometimes can make us age a little bit or feel like we're aging a little bit because it's hard to keep up with. But that's typical for aging. But when it comes to doing something familiar, that can be a challenge. So confusion with time or place is common. A common sign or symptom of dementia. This is someone perhaps not knowing it's 2022, that maybe they think it's in the 70s or 80s, and they recognize their kids as being children still, not necessarily adults, or forgetting, that it's winter outside and dressing appropriately for the season because maybe they don't remember the day or the month or the year. So this orientation can be more confusing as the disease progresses, but this might happen in a sign or symptom. Like they might not recognize their house as their home. It could be that their house from their childhood is more recognizable as their home. But this is really an early, for earlier stages, it's not going to really be as dramatic, I would say. It's a little bit more like, I'm at the store, how did I get here? Things like that. So is that something that, you've ever experienced in working with families? Maybe their loved one getting confused and wandering.
We had a gentleman who, a lot of times in neighborhoods, homes can look very similar. There's the same builder or whatever. And he went to what he thought was his house and was trying to get in the door and became very agitated. And, thankfully, nothing bad happened to him, like someone, with a gun shooting him or something, thinking he was breaking in because it was at night. But that was one thing. And it's, kind of understandable how it happened because the house looked very similar. It was just on another street from his. And he was so confused because he really couldn't understand why he couldn't unlock the door because it was his house.
Yeah. And I think this is where building community beyond your family is really important. I also worked with a woman whose husband, once he started wandering, that was kind of her moment of she wanted him to be in a secure environment for safety purposes or reasons. But fortunately, she had communicated to her close neighbors about what was going on. And her neighbors had found that he would just, wander out of the house during the day and was walking down the street, but the neighbors found him. And fortunately, they knew how to respond because they had had that discussion. Mm-hmm. And the neighbors really helped support this woman because of what was going on with her husband. So it is important to have these conversations and open dialogues with family and people that are close by in case something happens.
Exactly.
So sometimes it does, typical age-related change would be for this particular symptom would be, have you ever forgot what day it is, or what week it is? Or I always joke with my parents because they're retired and they never they don't know what day of the week it is usually, unless unless they're visiting and it's like, okay, my daughter's in school today, but on Saturday we can go do stuff. So that's just typical because, they're not restricted to a schedule anymore. Yeah. So it changes a little bit. Okay, the next sign would be trouble understanding visual and spatial relationships. Now, this doesn't happen to everyone again. I want everyone to remember that you don't have to have all of these things to be concerned. And just a few of them might be warranted to go check out your physician. But there are people that the visual and spatial relationships change in the brain. So it's difficult to decipher or filter information that you're looking at. So, for example, judging the distance between a car in front of you and when you need to stop can be different than, typically what we would see. So you could see how driving might become very complicated for someone with dementia, or they might see there's those old kitchens that have the black and white tile. Well, black tile might look like holes in the ground, or a dark rug or something like that might look like a hole in the ground to someone with dementia. I've had experience working with a gentleman who had severe spatial relationship issues, and he couldn't, at some points, he was further progressed, but he had trouble feeding himself because of the spatial relationship between lifting a spoon or a fork and trying to feed himself. Mm-hmm. So there's just different ways that the visual image and spatial relationships can happen, but really it can affect balance as well as your, gait and walking. If you think that if there's a lot of shadows, if there's a lot of busy carpet, that kind of thing, that can really affect someone with dementia. So of course, we also have age-related vision changes as too. So cataracts or glaucoma or
macular degeneration.
Yeah. So you add that on top of a dementia diagnosis, that can be really challenging. So that's something to kind of keep an eye out on. Next one would be new problems with words and speaking or writing. So typically we might have, for busy people in life, we might have trouble finding the right words sometimes when we're explaining a story or something like that, but usually it pops up for us. But those dealing with a dementia diagnosis may stop in the middle of a conversation and have no idea how to continue, or they may repeat themselves. And I have seen people with dementia do this so fluidly that you wouldn't even notice. Mm-hmm. That it's just I had a woman that I worked with all the time, and she recognized me. She'd always call me Cookie because she didn't know my name. I mean, you would never know that she had dementia if you didn't know her that well, because she was very good at keeping a conversation going, even though she didn't really know what was going on, or what we were really discussing. So there is some coverage there too, I think. So pay attention to the conversations you have with your loved ones. Maybe take some time and have a deeper conversation, see how they're doing, what their days look like. They may struggle with vocabulary, having trouble naming familiar object, or use the wrong name. Instead of watch, they say hand clock. They want the flour for the recipe, but they're calling it milk or something.
And I know you mentioned about vision, and this may be in your warning signs too, but hearing as well. Is that one of your warning signs? Because we've been running into that a lot where people, they thought they had dementia And it was because they couldn't hear. And so they just withdrew and weren't involved, weren't really responding, and wasn't dementia at all. It was hearing loss.
Yeah, so that is not one of the warning signs for dementia specifically, but with that, I will say that there could be something else going on, which is why it's really critical to get to the doctor to rule out things that aren't necessarily dementia. It could be hearing loss. It could be a UTI. Maybe there's not enough vitamins in the body that, you need different nutrition or something. But there's definitely things that could mimic dementia symptoms. Could even be a side effect of medication. So it's really important if you're noticing anything to work with your physician to rule those things out. So thank you for bringing that up. That's a good point. Misplacing things and losing the ability to retrace steps is another sign and symptom. We've talked about this a little bit, like, where are my keys? Where's my car? But we're not really putting those things in unusual places. My keys are probably on a table and I forgot where I set them. They're not in the fridge, or they're not, in the mailbox or something that would seem unusual. I've heard of families losing like the remote control and they later find it in the refrigerator or in the freezer.
These two things I want to mention are common and have happened to me, so don't worry about these two things. One is looking for your glasses and they're on top of your head. That happens to me on a regular basis. Actually, not regular, but it has happened. And the other one is you're on your phone and you're talking to someone, you're into your conversation, and then you're like in your car looking for your phone. Has that ever happened to you?
Yes, I was holding my phone recently looking for my phone. And it was just so embarrassing. I'm like, oh my gosh, someone pointed it out to me. So yes, that does happen. We're so easy in this life to just multitask everything and to think about so many things all at once that I think those things happen just typically to people. But the trick with this is that this person that is showing signs of dementia will lose the ability to retrace those steps or forget that they're even looking for something or misplace something. So for example, which this could, really cause some paranoia for people. For example, I worked with a woman who used to hide her perfume, her purse, for everything that was valuable, what she perceived as valuable to her. And then she would accuse others of stealing because she forgot that she was hiding stuff to keep it safe. So she really felt like people were targeting her and taking her items of value. So that was very challenging. And one of the things that I did to help make her feel at ease is that I was going to get to the bottom of it. I was going to call the police and I was going to figure out what happened. I became that person to help rescue the day, basically. And how could someone do this to you? So this is just a way you can respond to ease the person's mind that you're there to help and you care.
And that's the best response, instead of responding with, no one is stealing from you. What are you talking about? The best way is what you just said, like, I'm going to help you figure this out.
Yeah. So when you can approach with compassion, regardless of the situation going on, it's going to ease the moment for everyone. So another warning sign is decreased or poor judgment. So some of these things kind of like relate to each other, but individuals may experience difficulty with decision making. For example, going back to the finances, making poor judgment on dealing with money, pay less attention to grooming or keeping themselves clean. So those things that may have been important to them previously may not just they just may not address them anymore. Or we talked about the exploitation of money. I can't remember who told me this story, but I feel like it was pretty recent, where someone was saying that their loved one was scammed out of money at a Home Depot parking lot. Someone was trying sell whatever service they were in a Home Depot parking lot, and the gentleman agreed, went to the bank, got money out, paid this person, and then just completely lost the funds. Like there are people out there targeting people to scam them.
Yeah.
So this becomes very dangerous.
We had a lady who she had a lawn service, and the guy, I guess, realized, oh, she has some dementia. So he took advantage of her by saying, oh, we need to do such and such to your yard. You know, your grass is dying, so we have to do this, and it's going to be $5,000. Okay, she'd write him a check. And so this went on probably for about a year till a family member got involved and saw what was happening. But just she trusted this person, and he took advantage of her.
Yeah. So you can see how this could become particularly dangerous, and you definitely want to protect your loved ones from financial exploitation. So just keep having those conversations. Evaluate for yourself. What are some recent purchases? What are they doing? Is there anything that sticks out as red flags to you? So like Lori just said, that could be someone familiar to the house, like someone who's doing routine work on the house. I feel like a lot of the stories I hear about are related to fixing the house, the roof, the yard, the gutters, the whatever it is. But those are some things I would want to inquire about if you're noticing them.
And unfortunately, I do want to mention this because this comes up quite a bit. It can be a family member who's taking advantage also.
Yeah, we've seen that too. And so making sure that you have financial documents in place to that loved one. Unfortunately, there are families out there or people that are very close to your loved one that can exploit them for financial gain. And it's terrible, but it's really important to have your legal documents in place and work with an attorney to get that all sorted out. So we talked about withdrawal from work or social activities. So the last one really is change in mood and personality. So there might be some changes here when it comes to dementia, not just the confusion. Confusion's pretty normal for dementia if you're not understanding, place and time and things like that, or you can't recall what's going on, or you're confused with the moment. But becoming suspicious, depressed, fearful, anxious, or becoming easily upset at home or with friends, or even when they're outside of their comfort zone. So the home, this goes hand in hand with social isolation too, I feel like. The home or wherever you're at, where that becomes your safety net a little bit, or your loved one, so your primary caregiver. If they're kind of taking over everything for you, then they can become the person that's really the safety net for the person with dementia. So when they have to go to a doctor's appointment or they have to go, wherever they have to go, that might cause increased anxiety or fear for the person living with dementia. So again, it's really important to have more than a primary caregiver. It's expanding that care network, having loved ones or friends that can come over and be present in the life of someone with dementia can really help ease that quality of life. And although mood and personality can be affected, there's things that you can work with your doctor on, but there's also quality of life things that you can do to enhance the living with dementia experience for that person. And really, even if a caregiver says they don't need help or don't want help, they're going to need it. It's just a matter of time. They say for every person living with dementia, it takes 2.5 loved ones, family members, friends, whoever, to care for that person. So that's a pretty big statistic. And it's something I think it's really important to remember as families are heading into the holidays. Maybe they live far away. There's still things you can do, even if you're a long distance family member, to help your loved ones. Those are the kind of the signs and symptoms. I did want to talk a little bit about what you should do if you recognize these things in your loved ones. And honestly, early detection really does matter for dementia. Not only can the person take part of their own planning and care and planning for the future of what their own choices are, but there's treatment options. There's things you can do to implement meaning and purpose into your loved one's life alongside them. And so that early detection and visiting your doctor, if you think something's going on, is really important. And of course, you want to rule out anything that may not be dementia. We do have a question that we get all the time about, and I think that it's important to bring it up here because people always want to know, like, the doctor Like if they say that they just have dementia, like how do we know if it's Alzheimer's or it's just dementia and things like that? And I would encourage you to get more information. You wouldn't go to the doctor and receive a diagnosis of cancer and not want to know what type and what stage and how to deal with it and go to a specialist. So this is the same thing for dementia. You don't want to just get a dementia diagnosis and not know what's causing the dementia. Is it Alzheimer's? Is it something else? And do you need to see a specialist? Do you need to know, what kind of treatments are available? That kind of thing. So I just wanted to reiterate that a little bit here because unfortunately there are people out there that just get that dementia diagnosis. And so it's really hard to get further treatment when you don't have, a pinpointed diagnosis.
I'm glad you made that comparison because I had never really thought of it that way. And when we speak with people, they'll say, oh, he's diagnosed with dementia. And then we ask for more information. And a lot of times they don't have it. So if someone takes their loved one to the doctor, they receive a diagnosis of dementia, at that point, would they say, I want to go see a neurologist to get, more tests done? What is the best procedure for that or protocol?
So going to your doctor, your primary care physician may be able to determine dementia based on their own ability to assess and things like that. But there's specialists out there that can do further testing to kind of pinpoint what type of dementia is suspected in order to have the right treatment options. Now, your primary care physician might recommend a neurologist, a clinical neuropsychologist, or someone who can do further testing. But the Alzheimer's Association has a doctor's appointment checklist that we encourage you to take with you because it just maps out the questions for you and you don't have to really prepare too much in advance other than having these lists available. But it is important to include family members in these doctor's appointments, not just the person with suspected dementia. There are a lot of stories that I've heard where people cover their dementia for the doctor because they see the doctor for 5 minutes maybe. So having the family there to describe what's going on, even if you're going to talk privately to the doctor, if you're a spouse, you can call ahead and do that. If you're medical power of attorney at some point, if that paperwork is already in place, you can work with the doctor's office to let them know you have concerns in a way that's not going to embarrass or shame your loved one. So that's something to consider. Yes, a dementia diagnosis is just this umbrella term, but there's many forms of dementia, and you really do want to know what you're dealing with so that you can see the right doctors, you can get the right treatment, and hopefully we'll have medication and treatment available for the pathology of the disease coming out in the next few years. There's a lot of excitement surrounding that right now in research. So we're very hopeful that that's going to, with early detection and getting people, qualified during the earlier stages of the disease, that'll be helpful for our nation.
Absolutely.
And people affected. Yeah.
And if you can share that checklist with me, I'll make sure that we make it available on our website too, and along with the podcast. This is such great information, and I think it's so helpful for people to be prepared. It's always better to come into this in a prepared way and being proactive. That's the word I'm looking for, being proactive when you go to visit instead of just reactive. So if you've listen to this podcast on your drive to grandma's house or wherever, I think it's important that you have this knowledge now and you know what to look for. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Of course. And, we don't want to hope that anyone has to deal with this ever. But as you're headed into the holiday season, as you have loved ones that are starting to age, just keep an eye out. The more informed you can be, the better support your family's going to get, and you can help your family better understand. So we definitely encourage you to share the podcast. There's different topics when it comes to dementia as well. So if you want to learn more. And then, of course, the Alzheimer's Association is always available to chat with you 24 hours, 7 days a week for our helpline. So that number is 1-800-272-3900.
And people can visit your website, which is
alz.org. We have a caregiver center online, free e-learning, support groups, educational topics that you can join, a wealth of resources for caregivers and for folks living with this disease.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast, as you are each month, and you share such great information on dementia that I know will help other people. Now, for you, people who are listening, please share this podcast with your friends and family. Get this information out there because I think it is so, so important. And be sure that you are subscribing and following the podcast so you never miss an episode because we share a lot of good information each Friday. So thank you so much for listening, and we will talk to you next week. Bye-bye.